Let's begin our business of shaping policy for today by looking at crude oil production in Nigeria. According to OPEC monthly report, crude oil production in Nigeria has dropped to 1.23 million barrels per day. It started in January with 1.4 million barrels per day, in February 1.3 million barrels per day, and now the decline being experienced. What is responsible for these? And what will be the implication of these for the 2024 budget and also for the economy? Let's hear the opinion of our in-house guest who joins us here in the studio. We're being joined by Sam Orovwuje. Glad to have you join us this morning.
Good morning, Femi. My pleasure to be here.
Great.
Good morning, sir. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Blessing. Thank you.
How was your weekend?
We thank God we are alive.
Great. All right. Looking at crude oil production in Nigeria, if you look at the progression from January to now, in January, Nigeria recorded 1.4 million barrels per day. In February, 1.3 million barrels per day. And according to OPEC monthly reports in March, that's declined to 1.23 million barrels per day. What do you make of this development, and what will likely be the impact of this on the economy?
Thank you very much indeed. I think the issues are very clear, and the implications for the budget is far-reaching, particularly when the budget benchmark was based on 1.7 million barrel per day. So that has a big implication, and month on month, there's been a decrease of an average of about 6% decrease month on month. Therefore, in the long run, it's going to have negative impact on the revenue projection for the year. On the other hand, that impact in terms of whatever excuse the government has given, I recall the Minister of State for Petroleum, Henikin Lokobiri, was saying that they are making some repairs on some of the infrastructure, particularly pipelines. I think to a very large extent, that does not really speak to the fact. But if you look at it from OPEC itself, it has two channels or two windows at which she gets information. Number one, direct information in terms of communication, which put it at 1.2 billion barrel in terms of what Nigeria reported in the decrease in terms of production. But when you look at the other window in terms of those who takes some of this export commodity out, it's put at about 1.3. So if you disaggregate that figure, yes, it's within the same level of decrease, particularly when January was 1.4, which was remarkably okay based on the budget projection. But if you look further, it's not only Nigeria that has a decrease in terms of the OPEC quota regime. You have Iraq in that table. Then you have Venezuela that has a decrease in terms of the quota. So it's not only a Nigerian issue, but regrettably, when the price of Brent has gone up remarkably, which will have give us a more receivable in terms of earning, and we're having a low production output. That is very, very, very discomforting, particularly where you have a budget and an economy that is challenged in terms of the ratio of recurrent and capital expenditure, and a monoproduct economy that ends essentially from oil, and we're losing about 6% in terms of the output. I think that is not too good for the country.
All right. The issue of low crude oil production in Nigeria has been lingering for quite a while, for a country that used to produce around 2 million barrels per day to even be producing less than 1.5 million barrels per day, which is the upper quota for Nigeria. There have been several efforts to curtail the activities of those involved in oil theft. But so far, what is your assessment of the investigations and the collective effort of the military and the Navy in providing surveillance and protection for the crude oil facilities?
I think with the deployment of a private security company, in addition to the military for surveillance, there were some improvement. But then that sector is still challenged. There's still high level of sabotage in terms of the infrastructure from the production processes to the export point. So the government needs to look more into how they can secure the pipeline. But then effort has been made in terms of contracting. And if you see some of the report from Tantis that has been contracted by the federal government to be a wash over the pipeline, there is some remarkable improvement. But then we need to step up so that the projection of 1.7 billion barrel production daily is achievable. If the budget estimates are based on that, and we are fall below what we're doing previously. So we need to up our games in terms of, number one, supervision, surveillance, so that we can meet up with our OPEC quota regulation.
Let's look at this issue of pipeline vandalism and oil theft. Over the years, it's been of concern, as much as the federal government is making effort to ensure that this thing becomes something of the past, yet you still see this issue contending with our oil production and even oil sector in Nigeria. What should be done differently this time around? Will you advocate for a military approach or diplomatic approach? And what would be the role of the community that are hosting these pipelines?
I think for me, the government needs to deploy technology in terms of surveillance. This fire brigade approach in terms of deploying physical men to man those infrastructure, I think that's not good enough. They must get best practices from other countries where technology is deployed, where your infrastructure lines can be observed from a base where technology is able to look at the infraction into those infrastructures. Therefore, why the Navy in particular has a core responsibility within the waters to protect some of those things, there is a need for more deployment of technology, even if it has to be a private or an outsourced commitment by the federal government to see how we can improve on the surveillance, particularly on vandalism and oil theft that has reduced the earnings that we have. So a holistic approach in terms of the military having more commitment. On the other hand, the host community, which the Petroleum Industry Act has provided for, the government must have a commitment in terms of the engagement of host community beyond what they have even promised in the Act. There's a need to provide some other incentive to host communities where people have infractions. If they are able to provide intelligence, they are paid some form of compensation so that that will help to reduce the negative impact of vandalism and those who are involved on oil theft in those areas.
Aside the issue of vandalism, do you also think that in terms of technical capacity, what Nigeria has for oil exploration is dropping?
No, I think if we take the comment of Minister of State for Petroleum, Henneken Lokobri, I was saying that some of those infrastructures are being repaired so that some of the issues and some of those infractions that have been made to the pipeline is guided again. So if the government can take a very serious element in terms of protection of those infrastructure, then we'll be able to sustain that production capacity as provided by OPEC.
What will be the impact of, revitalizing our local refineries? You have that of Port Harcourt, you have that of Warri, and now that of Dangote is on board, which by next month It's going to release some petroleum products, you know. What should be done to look at some of these refineries? We learned a particular refinery should come on board, yet the work is being done. Will this not help in improving the production? And will you advocate for these refineries to be neglected and then new ones to be built? Because the argument is the technology is also obsolete.
I think for me, there are two sides to this question. Number one, the government, first and foremost, need to fix those infrastructures that has to deal with the production lines in line with the desired OPEC output. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, once they're able to fix the refineries, then this capacity they are not able to meet up with will equally challenge those refineries as an off-taker of what is produced for refining. So I think it's a two-way issue. So we need to deal with it from the point of view of managing those infrastructure to reduce vandalization and theft on the one hand. On the other hand, they need to fix these refineries as well. Once they're able to fix that and sort that other problem, then we're able to meet up with the OPEC quota regime. Then we're able to sustain local refining. Thank God that Dangote refinery is going to be an off-taker as well in terms of crude production. We have to improve the local refined products that are available for consumers.
With the example given by Dangote refinery, don't you think the argument that those refineries should be privatized or handed over to private individuals could be valid?
There's an ongoing debate in terms of whether they should be privatized, whether government should continue to have hands in the running. Whatever side of the debate, unless you really have the real facts on the table, sometimes it's difficult to speak to it. But what Dangote initiative has proved in recent time is that a private sector regime can drive refining process in Nigeria. To that extent, then a private sector initiative is desirable. But then there are equally challenge even in other climes where a PPP arrangement, even in other sectors, particularly water, infrastructure elsewhere, where a private sector arrangement has not even been sustained. So even public infrastructures are properly run elsewhere to deliver the common good or the public good. So these refineries were privatized originally by the Obasanjo regime. It was Yar'Adua who revised some of those decisions. But Dangote has proven that private sector can drive the process. But then those within the government circle, when they are making decisions, whether it's the right decision to equally privatize them or just do outright sales rather than a PPP arrangement. So that is a decision that has to be made by the government.
Let's have a look at the implication of this fall in crude oil production on the refineries. If Nigeria currently is producing around 1.2 million barrels per day, how will it be sufficient for the local refineries and even for exports? Doesn't that create a problem?
Yes, I think we spoke to that earlier, that they need to improve on the efficiency of crude oil production, look at all those infractions in terms of vandalization, in terms of theft, in that regard. On the other hand, if you are producing within a capacity because you are constrained by some other environmental factors that you are not able to fix almost immediately. So there should be a mix because national interest is uppermost. So even if you are producing at 1.2
million barrels
per day, then what you need to do is to draw up a mix for export and keep some of your crude for local refining, because how to improve on what you bring to your country's citizen, even though you are going to earn more in some cases from export, then you need to balance that economic interest between national interest and other economic interests outside.
Let's look at the issue of modular refineries in Nigeria. When you talk about a modular refinery, you know, they want the capacity of about 30,000 barrels, you know. What would be the impact of this if this is being facilitated on a commercial level in Nigeria? What would be the impact of that on crude oil production?
That will stimulate more output within the window of OPEC production quota. So that is given. But then if you have modular refineries, then the competition in terms of refined products will improve and the consumers will be better for it. And I think we need to take some real example studies from Egypt. If you go into Outer Cairo, as you move to those areas of where you have the pyramids, you have a host of modular refineries that are just refining products for some communities, and the gas that is being exploited is being converted into some form of electricity. So if that is done, the efficiency in terms of utilization of crude output, in terms of utilization of refined products for consumption, will help to drive down the price, which will become beneficial to citizens.
Some time ago, some states around the north were explored for oil, and in one of them, I think it was discovered now. But for other areas that oil exploration has not really started, do you think it's time for more exploration of areas where crude oil can be found and in commercial quantity in Nigeria to add up to the existing ones? And for those areas that it's been explored, what should be next level for Nigeria as part of ensuring that what comes out from those areas actually gets to the right channels and not tapped along the way?
I think the NNPC investment arm is already exploring and exploiting other possible marginal feeds that will feed into the current production. So I think they need to scale up those processes. In terms of resource availability, we already have those marginal feeds operating. But then in terms of translating the one that they just discovered in the north, I think, if I remember that name correctly, whether Colma or I can't remember, so let me not go in terms of the name, but that has have a commercial quantity. So the exploration and the exploitation is being done. And when that is done, finally, that will add into the crude oil production output, and that will improve on the OPEC window. Now that we have Dangote refineries and we're encouraging modular refineries, this will feed into the crude oil production mechanism, and that will show up our revenue, whether we're producing locally or whether we're exporting.
Let's look at oil bunkering as well, which is very peculiar in the Niger Delta region. There are those people who argue, because if you look at the mindset of those who are engaging in this, they feel, okay, these resources are in a region, I have the privilege to take advantage of it. There are those who argue that these people should be co-opted into this business officially, should be trained, given the right training, and then, you know, brought into this business properly. Do you subscribe to that? Do you think that will reduce the sabotage being experienced from that region as regards crude oil production?
I think the first way to respond to that is that we should not encourage illegality in terms of how the natural resource endowment is being paid for by certain categories of persons. That is theft, and it should be disencouraged. What is important, in my view, is that those people that are involved in some of those illegality in terms of theft, what we can do as a government is to see how we can deploy the modular refineries and give licenses to those people that are involved in some form of illegality, in form of theft, and see how we can pull the modular refineries, have a process, have a licensing regime, so that you can take some of those people within that industry and prepare them and direct them in the right direction in terms of licensing, in terms of supervision, in terms of meeting the technical requirement for refining. Therefore, that might bring some sanity in that region where people feel that if they have a legitimate means of earning based on the windows of opportunity that is provided for them, maybe that will reduce the incentive for criminality in that region.
So, if, according to former President Obasanjo, about 1.7 million barrels of crude oil are stolen, that's high-level theft. Doesn't that suggest some form of complicity? Because how do people, even if it call it vandalism or anything, steal 1.7 million barrels and it goes almost unnoticed and no one is caught, no one is prosecuted, it continues year after year?
I think for me, it's a very complex issue to deal with, particularly with the technical nature of oil exploration and exploitation. The figures are alarming. Therefore, the deployment of technology, as it were, will help, because this is within the organized crime, so to speak, where some level of connivance between regulators, operators, and how will a ship come into an international water, and the Navy is not able to identify those kind of sea piracy that come to take the crude outside our environment. So the challenge here is that the government must take a very critical look at that criminality that operates within that sector and find a way to provide technologies that will help to sanitize the kind of operations in terms of theft, even beyond vandalism. So if you have that kind of margin between what you currently produce and what is currently stolen, and you disaggregate those figures and try and see vis-a-vis revenue that we're losing, then the government must find a way to look at it more critically. But like I said, it looks more of an organized crime, and to deal with that kind of organized crime, you need some international collaboration in terms of how you can fight that system in a way that you can sanitize it. But I think based on its technical nature, it's difficult. But then technology with collaboration with some international security companies may help too. So what we can do again is to see how we can get best practices from Saudi Arabia that has been doing remarkably well over the years in terms of even the deployment of their resource, even for local refining and all that. So if we're able to do that, then maybe that theft challenge will be reduced minimally. I doubt if that can be taken off completely because of environmental factors and the way the oil and gas has been managed, even between the host communities in Nigeria in the last 60-something years.
You know, we're talking about technology. I remember at a public function, where the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Petroleum Resources, was saying that the federal government will deploy artificial intelligence towards tackling this issue of oil theft and vandalism. But is that enough? What should also be the role of the host communities, community leaders? Because these people who engage in these things, they live in those communities. Is it all about technology alone, or they need to also complement it with the impact of people in those communities, what you call about local surveillance, local kind of security outfit that can also help in tackling this issue of oil theft?
Femi, if I understand you correctly, I think technology, whether you call it machine tools, whether you call it artificial intelligence, should be deployed where there's almost a near perfection scenario that you can get those things sorted out. But relying essentially on the host community in terms of surveillance, I think that should be a thing of the past. But I think what we should be discussing, or what we should highlight as a country, is the means of engagement with the community. I think we have a very defective state policy that supports oil and gas in Nigeria. Because if you look at some other climes where the resource endowment of those countries have been properly deployed for the citizens, there are certain mechanisms that have been put in place that sustain those kind of investment. There are sovereign investment, particularly for oil-producing communities, where a big chunk of the revenue goes to the community. Maybe if that kind of incentive or initiative is put in place in terms of host communities, as you put it, they are earning capacity beyond the 13% derivation that go through the state structure and does not get to the people. There are best practices elsewhere where the local community, an investment is made for them and through sovereign wealth fund, where those monies earn income. Those incomes are given to the host community in forms of dividends. And the examples of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and even in Alaska has been a model in terms of what should be done to be able to sustain your infrastructure, sustain host community engagement between government and even the oil exploration companies in those areas. So if we're able to have a holistic approach based on government taking some of these things very seriously, then we might get off the hook of this infraction in terms of theft.
So what do you think the implication of the drop in crude oil outputs for Nigeria, and you mentioned Venezuela and Iran?
Iraq.
Yeah, Iraq rather. What do you think it will be on the price of oil at the international market? Is it significant enough to cause any issues?
To a very large extent, if people are not able to meet their production quota, the implication therefore is that that ecosystem, what you are expecting in terms of crude oil production for export, becomes a challenge. Therefore, is likely to have a positive impact in terms of the price going up rather, because the production capacity that is expected that we collectively provide the OPEC global output is shortchanged by some of these challenges. Therefore, the price will go up to a very large extent.
All right, away from Nigeria now, let's also look at what is playing out in the Nigerian oil sector, where Niger is set to deliver about 150 million liters of diesel to Mali, a neighboring country, as a result of partnership. You know, Mali has been battling with the issue of power supply, and so diesel is in high demand. What do you make of this development? Why Nigeria is experiencing a kind of decline? Here you have another nation thinking of, you know, exporting to another nation as a result of partnership, about 450 million liters of diesel.
I think to some extent, when you look at it from an indirect income or indirect earning, it will be beneficial to Nigeria as well, because there's a link between Nigeria and the Niger Republic. I think we have a pipeline feeding into Niger. So if Niger is able to do 150 million diesel supply to Mali, therefore the crude that will be supplied for the distillation process that will provide the diesel on the other side of Niger. But regrettably, if we are having a direct relationship in terms of providing that export, the earning will be more beneficial to us. But by and large, I think that's a welcoming development. Niger will earn some good money from that service. Recall those guys in that Sahel region are taking advantage of their new initiative in terms of partnership. But in form of indirect earning, we will equally benefit because the volume of what we will be supplying to Niger will improve since they already have an export, a window for production of refining that will improve on their supply to Mali. So indirectly, it's beneficial to us, in my view.
All right, let's look at what Niger is proposing to do. Now, sell diesel to Mali at half the normal rate. Why is it possible, or why would it be possible for them to sell to Mali at half the normal rate? Doesn't the exchange rate affect them? Because we find that in Nigeria, diesel is very expensive, selling almost about 1,500 until Dangote refinery says it's going to sell at about 1,000 naira per liter of diesel in Nigeria. But if Niger thinks that they will be able to sell to Mali diesel half the normal rate, now what is the business sense in that, and do you think it is possible for Niger to do that? Doesn't the same issues that apply with Nigeria when it comes to production apply to them?
No, I don't think so. I think we must see it from a strategic point of view. They have some interest in that regard. So that economic interest in terms of Naira, Kobo, or Sefa is not the case in my understanding here. If they say they are going to sell half the price, there's a strategic relationship. The other collaborative effort that is not in the public domain. So if we look at it with one lens, we're likely to make a wrong judgment. But in terms of international politics and international relations, this might just be an investment into Mali in terms of a support system they're trying to provide for their foreign policy objective. So in that regard, the government itself may absorb the real economic cost of the production of diesel. So if they are saying they are going to sell, so they are going to absorb that. So a form of subsidy regime to drive their foreign policy objective, in my view, might be responsible. The other strategic objective that is not in the public domain. So we may not be able to speak in a detailed term to the backstage relationship issue that is involved in that negotiation process.
Now, looking at the development between Niger and Mali, isn't that a form of lesson or a reference for Nigeria to see how it can also expand its potential business? Looking at neighboring African countries, you know, at one point we used to be the largest producer of oil in the continent, even though it has declined. But looking at the opportunities provided in the continent, isn't that an opportunity for Nigeria to expand its business? Look at Mali now, who is battling with the issue of power supply for years, and hence in their need of diesel and other petroleum products.
Beyond the economic interest, the other political or geopolitical alignment within the continent, so you must take cognizance of that. Then two, natural resource endowment is not only domiciled in Nigeria. There are some countries, some 10, 20 years ago, that have not been open to exploration and exploitation. Ghana is already doing exploration of oil and gas. To that extent, their dependence on Nigerian products has reduced. Uganda, about 10 years ago, discovered oil as well, and they are equally exploring those products. So if you look at it from that perspective, where new business development in terms of natural resource endowment, some other countries are equally exploring those opportunities. Then that window that you had as a big brother in terms of even having this natural resource. Some other people are now gifted and they're exploring those resources. Then to the extent to which you can take advantage of the economic opportunities within the continent is equally challenged, because competition from other people are already there. So in terms of the initiative between Nigeria in terms of the Trans-African Oil and Gas project between Nigeria and Morocco, some other countries that are contiguous to the pipeline will benefit for that, and that will become very beneficial to Nigeria in the long run. So we must look at the dynamics in terms of geopolitics, in terms of economic opportunity of some other countries where they are able to exploit their own resources for their benefit. But that is not to say you can't look for markets elsewhere within the continent. So that becomes a business objective on behalf of those who run those enterprises.
Looking at the way the alliance of Sahel states are going, the three of them, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, what does that say about this alliance that's born out of them wanting to provide some form of support for each other after coup and taking to their own course? Is there any lesson to learn from what they're building? Political collaboration, economic collaboration for other African states? Maybe not in the area of coup, but from what they're doing.
I think the lesson, in my view, particularly for ECOWAS, whose membership has been reducing in recent times. So they need to clean up their houses. But it's within the purview of those countries to form an alliance that is strategic, that is beneficial to that country. So within the United Nations, it's what you call sovereignty. Every nation is sovereign to make their decisions. So if they feel that their strategic interest is threatened within the ECOWAS sub-region, and they form alliance among themselves for their own strategic interests, then that's well and good for them. But the challenge is, on the other hand, is really for ECOWAS that was not able to manage their relationship with Niger and some of those other countries that pulled out of ECOWAS.
Now let's wrap up with what we started with, which is the Nigeria example. Now it's obvious that the crude oil production has declined to 1.2 million barrels per day. What would you expect the federal government to do now as against the production? I mean, the projection for the 2024 budget, which is about 1.7 million barrels per day. What would you expect the federal government to do to cover up for this shortfall?
If local breweries' assertion or claims are right, they say they are fixing and working on some of the pipeline to improve on the efficiency. So either efficiency is determined, therefore there will be an improvement. So let's see it not as a political posturing or political grandstanding that we're fixing a problem, whereas the challenge is there. But if they don't fix that, the implication in terms of policy direction for the new government will be challenged to some extent, because the revenue or the receivable derivable from the projection of 1.7 million barrels a day will negatively impact on the performance of this year's budget. In that regard, therefore, I think they must be doing something different to see how that environment is sanitized, so that we can maintain the OPEC quota regime that is available to Nigeria.
What should be the role of the oil companies themselves in this?
Okay, the oil companies don't operate in isolation. So we talked about host community engagement earlier. We talked about the role of government as a facilitator and a regulator of that industry. So if everybody in that ecosystem find a way to do what needs to be done in terms of their responsibility. Therefore, we'll be able to sustain the output. Even the oil company, in terms of what they even do, what even they export out of the country is even questionable, even in the first instance, because they are the one determining what is going out and what kind of revenue is coming to the country. So there's even a debate on the fact that even what the oil company, the measure that exploit and export this revenue, don't even declare exactly what they produce. And that, again, is a challenge for the government, particularly those people at the Department of Petroleum Resources and the presidency. So I think they should just deploy AI as a promise in terms of how they can manage those infrastructure, national assets for the public goods.
All right, we just have to leave the conversation here. Let's hope that the minister has promised that AI will be deployed into this. We want to see how that is going to play out. And that will be more interesting, you know, will make more news for us.
We wish so,
yeah,
because
efficiency.
it's about
let's
the common good of Nigeria.
So Sam, we must thank you for your thoughts and your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.